Welcome to another episode of Tank Talks, your personal think tank for all things startups and venture capital. I'm your host, Matt Cohen, founder and managing partner at Ripple Ventures. On today's show, we are talking about the rise of digital asset marketplaces with the CEO of Flippa, Blake Hutchison. Everyone knows that small businesses have been the lifeblood of our economies, but when it comes to buying and selling these businesses, it's often been hard to figure out. That elusive exit for small business owners has been hard to come by. However, with so many businesses being started and managed online, the use of platforms like Flippa has exploded recently due to its ability to help make the discovery and acquisition of these businesses much easier for everyday investors. On today's show, we asked Blake to explain how the entire process works when listing or buying a business on Flippa and what a typical acquisition actually looks like. We dig into what makes a successful digital marketplace and how his team is trying to bring transparency and efficiency to the M&A process. Finally, we talk about the additional benefits of using a platform like Flippa to sell or buy a business and what his company's plans are for the future after just announcing their Series A raise. But before we get started today, as our listeners probably know by now, the team at Ripple is always focused on helping our founders and CEOs find the best partners to work with. However, before we initiate any provider with intros to our companies, we always make sure to try the product first. And when it came to managing our fund expenses at Ripple, we were super excited when the team at Jeeves came knocking on our door. The team at Jeeves helped get me and my team set up with physical and virtual cards in days. I was able to allow my teammates to expense items in multiple currencies, allowing them to pay for anything, anywhere, at any time. We weren't asked for any personal guarantees or to pay any setup or annual fees either. Not only does Jeeves save us time, but they also give us up to 3% cash back on our purchases, including expenses like Google, Facebook, or AWS every month. The best part, Jeeves puts up the cash and you settle up once every 30 days, unlike some other corporate card companies that make you prepay every month. Jeeves offers a truly all-in-one expense management corporate card program for international startups, and we at Tank Talks could not be more excited to officially partner with them. Listeners of Tank Talks can get set up with a demo of Jeeves today and take advantage of our Tank Talks special with a $700 sign-up bonus and skip the waitlist that already has thousands of companies waiting by visiting tryjeeves.com/Tank Talks to get set up today. Now let's get into this week's episode with the CEO of Flippa, Blake Hutchison. Thanks for joining us in the Tank today, Blake.
Thanks for having me. Really great to be here, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, as everyone has witnessed over the last 3 years, digital businesses are now the lifeblood of the small business economy, with online platforms such as Amazon and Shopify enabling entrepreneurs and creators to start, grow, and scale their side projects into sustainable and profitable companies. And over the last decade, dominance of platforms like Amazon have created an entirely new economy driven completely by small businesses. For example, Amazon has over 6 million sellers, growing at a rate of almost 2,000 new sellers every day, which our audience is familiar with given our previous guest from Ecommerce, Anton von Ruden, who shared his views on the FBA rollup strategy. But only recently have we started to see the emergence of marketplaces like Flippa to help these small business owners sell their online businesses. Blake, I would love to kick things off with a better understanding of how you've seen the online marketplace industry evolve since starting Flippa, and what has been the biggest reason for its explosive growth recently.
Yeah, well, I think part of the biggest reason for our explosive growth relates to some of those statistics, Matt. The platform economy, which is that powered by Amazon and BigCommerce and WooCommerce and Shopify and WordPress, and the list goes on and on and on, is flying right now. So you mentioned 2,000 new Amazon sellers a day. I would only be guessing, but it would be probably 10 times that, the number of digital businesses that are started each day around the world somewhere. And so what Flippa's done is built a platform enabling those people to exit. And so we can only exist with the strength of the small business economy now being powered by these digital platforms.
Well, let's talk about what it's like, though, to actually sell an online business. You said there's so much supply out there. Well, the other side of a marketplace is the demand. So before sites like Flippa came around, what was the actual process like? And who were the main acquirers of sites before marketplaces like yours came into existence?
Yeah, the first comment I'll make is that people have been buying and selling businesses for thousands of years, right? And they've just taken on a very different form to what they have today. The reason that a platform like Flippa can exist is that in the digital economy, you have access to data, both operational and financial, and you can use that to verify an asset. And so one of Flippa's core value propositions is the ability to connect to that data and then verify that data at the source itself. So that's kind of piece one around, our platform and how it actually works to help buyers connect with sellers and understand the nature of an asset they're looking at. But as you said, the marketplaces only work when there's liquidity, and there are lots and lots of buyers. We sign up between 750 and 1,200 buyers every single day at Flippa. So there's actually more buy side than there is sell side. And I think that's probably just a function of the new economy, right? So you've got two types of buyer. You've got individuals, and they are essentially looking to supplement their income. And so they're people like you and I. We have jobs, but we'd like to earn a little bit more on the side. And perhaps we do that through a passion project. Perhaps it's e-commerce. It might be a blog. It could be an app. And what we're looking to do is continue our day job, but use our skill set to apply to a cash flow generating asset. The second type of buyer is an institutional buyer. And that institutional buyer is clearly in the game for very different reasons. They have expertise. They could be a publisher. They could be a media agency. They could be an Amazon aggregator. And what they are doing is they are orientating their acquisition activity to a particular type of asset where they have a skill set and often a particular type of category where they have a skill set. So that could be, wellness, it could be lifestyle, it could be home related. And that group of buyer is the buyer that has grown so much over the last 12 to 18 months. It typically was that institutional buyers were super big and looking for, small to mid-market asset sizes. Whereas what's happened is people are moving to micro, and that's because they can quickly acquire eyeballs, they can quickly understand the performance of an asset, layer it in with very little risk, layer it into an existing portfolio strategy, apply their skill set, and watch it grow.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of those small to medium-sized buyers. A lot of people probably assume that businesses that are looking to sell for a few $1,000,000 or more are best sold through brokers who help find the buyers, negotiate, and structure the deal. And for those larger deals over, say, 20 million, investment bankers are probably more capable of supporting those transactions, right? So how should sellers think about using online marketplaces like Flippa if they're near the high end of that range?
So I think there's two things. One, we're a market network. So you can either choose to leverage the broker community that operates on Flippa. There's over 35 broker companies around the world, or brokerages that operate on Flippa and use our extraordinary buyer base to attract interest for their sell side. And so people coming to Flippa can either choose to self-service the sales experience with, of course, the assistance of our technology and our account management team, or separately, they could choose to be partnered with a broker, and then the broker gets to use our platform for that benefit. Now, I think you're still right. I think if you're talking about a $5 to $10 million sale, more often than not, you're looking for a boutique investment banker or an M&A advisor, and you do that because the nature of the inquiry, the structure and the workflow around doing that deal is, one, time consuming, but two, it requires substantial amount of expertise around valuation. Now, if you're looking at a smaller sale, and that smaller sale I would say is probably below 2.5 million, because of the extraordinary amount of sales data that we have at our disposal, we can provide arguably the most accurate valuation globally because we've got the comp set. And so valuations are taken care of. That's piece one. We're able to help you connect to your data sources, be it Amazon Seller Central, be it Shopify, be it Google Analytics, be it a network of integrations. And so to some extent, we're able to provide the data at your fingertips and then let you expose that data to the buyer base. So what we do is we try to remove the friction from the sales experience and put the seller directly in touch with prospective buyers, because ultimately it's a marriage. It's not like buying a home. You tend to be acquiring, at least for a short period of time, the existing operator. And there's a consultancy period, there's a handover period. And so the closer a seller can get to the buyer and earlier on in that sales period, we tend to think it's better for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's double click on that process for a sec. I mean, it's amazing to see how you've democratized that elusive exit process for millions of online businesses who are selling on Amazon and Shopify, and even bloggers, SaaS entrepreneurs, and app developers, and many more. However, a lot of people think that just because they post their company on a website like Flippa, they're more likely to sell their business. So can you explain to our audience the process of selling and buying on Flippa and what that typical acquisition looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first piece is related to the valuation. So, buyers will pay for performance. They may look for opportunity, but they're paying for performance. And this is where most sellers, some sellers get it wrong. they tend to think that because they can list and identify substantial amount of opportunity as it relates to their particular business, that a buyer will pay for that opportunity. But what we often say, well, if you can leverage that opportunity, then you should probably do that yourself. So what buyers look for is performance. And so that's the first part of the sales process. We try to understand financially and operationally, how has your asset performed? And so critically, much like any given acquisition and or investment, the trailing 12-month performance of an asset is the most important measure from which a buyer will generate interest, from which a seller will generate interest. So the valuation is number one. Two, there's the listing process, and that relates to building a profile for your asset and being good at articulating what goes into running that asset each day, each month, per annum, so that buyers can get an understanding of whether their skill set matches. And so if you're super good at SEO, then it tends to be that you're going to attract someone who's looking for a really, really well optimized asset. If you're very good at Facebook ads and you've achieved a 5 times ROAS, then it'll tend to be that your asset will appeal to somebody else who is equally good at Facebook, because otherwise somebody who's not is jumping in the deep end. They've got to learn the skill set, and the asset won't perform as it has been performing for the trailing 12-month period. So once they've listed, we then let our programmatic engine take over, right? So basically we've got a matching algorithm, and we look at all of the preferences and mandates from the buyers that are set up on Flippa. We look at all the search behavior of all of the hundreds of thousands of buyers that engage with Flippa monthly. And based on your asset, based on the performance of that asset, based on the price, based on the category, based on the platform you use, we then match you up to a network of buyers. Buyers then start engaging. Now, of course, one of the problems is when you've got so many buyers, you can have too much engagement. And so, to be absolutely candid, what we've got to do is figure out within a big bunch of buyers who are the most acquisition fit for any given seller. But you'll get lots of interest, and that is, a good thing for the most part. It enables you to drive competitive tension. It enables you to have informed discussions with buyers and understand how ultimately they would value your asset. At that point in time, a buyer can, in short, make an offer, place a bid, or constructively put together a deal structure. Finally, if all parties are in alignment, we have Flippa Legal, we have Flippa Due Diligence, and we have integrated escrow. So I'll kind of stop there because it's quite a complex, long process. But when you're selling a business, it is complex and long. And so the average sales cycle for an asset listed on Flippa can be as short as 7 days, but for the most part, it's 45 days.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like, the typical stuff that you see in an M&A transaction, which is at the beginning, the financial due diligence, and at the end, the legal due diligence, is like kind of what you guys obviously need to have as the bookends. But really in the middle is where you guys seem to add the most value. One is helping articulate what it is that this business is great at, or what an acquirer should be good at in order to acquire and manage this business, which is really interesting. And the second part is weeding through the noise. I mean, I'll admit, I am a Flippa buyer because I signed up for the website. I've been tracking some of the companies that I'm interested in, and I get a daily or weekly email on companies that fit my filter mandates. But how are you able to filter through thousands and thousands of interested buyers to qualify them to make sure you're not wasting any of your sellers' time?
Think about quality score, get that term in your head, and then think about all of the different measures around which we can assess both a seller and or a buyer. And so quality score happens on sellers and quality score happens on buyers. And on sellers, we assess the listing, we assess the asset, and we assess the seller themselves. And so you can have a great asset and a bad listing. You can have a wonderful listing and a bad asset. And so we score those independently of each other. And so that's quality score for sellers. On the buy side, we look at, have you got a history of successfully acquiring on Flippa? We look at whether you've connected your LinkedIn accounts. We looked at whether you've provided verified bank balances. We look at whether you have created a profile and mandate and set up preferences. And we look at your search behavior and make sure that you've refined and got some sense of actually what you're looking for. If a buyer's all over the place, they're less likely to be a good fit for a seller. And so we apply quality score to buyers as much as we do sellers.
Interesting. It's kind of like the SoFi model for your digital footprint for qualifying you as a credit borrower, something like that as a buyer, though. Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah, it is. And one of the debates internally is, is someone who has, that's exactly right, but is someone who has acquired historically on Flippa better than someone who isn't or hasn't? The answer is no, they're not. So we need to use other methods and other factors when assessing the buy side.
No, that makes sense. And I love the transparency you guys are bringing to the M&A world. Your strategy of the verification at the source is so important. Can you explain a little bit more what that means to the audience and how you're bringing trust to the online marketplace world?
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain it is to look at all of the data that a seller would be able to see inside their own Shopify dashboard. And what we have done is rationalize that data and picked out the things that we think make most sense to a buyer when first assessing whether an asset is a good fit for them. And so we look at the order data, we look at the refund rate, we look at the average order value, we look at your geographic split of customers and where there is a concentration or not. And so what we're doing is we're taking the data that we think is most important for a buyer to understand when they first look at an asset. Now, if it's a SaaS business, software as a service, then it's a little bit different. You connect to Stripe and we'll look at churn, we'll look at MRR, we'll look at LTV, monthly recurring revenue, and lifetime value. So we assess which data we want to show a buyer based on the type of asset, and then, of course, the availability of the integration, which is a critical piece of our product roadmap moving forward.
And how many sellers come to the marketplace with missing information or holes in some of their data that you have to help guide them towards articulating better? Or are they already well prepared, do you think?
I don't think they're well prepared at all, unfortunately, Matt. I think that most sellers, they treat the selling process with not the level of respect they probably should. And most aren't fit for sale when they first consider it. Now, the good news is that, we're going to continue to work hard to make it easier and easier so that it's there at your fingertips. You know exactly what to do, and we can guide you through that process with data or other, including, assistance from our expert account management team all over the world. But, most people don't have clean financials. They've got their individual expenses tied up with business expenses. Most people aren't using cloud accounting. I think that, in the US at least, I think cloud accounting adoption is still around only 15%. And so that's quite a phenomenal thing when you don't use QuickBooks Online or FreshBooks or Xero to manage your books, and instead you're just operating on spreadsheets, or even worse, not tracking it at all. It makes a good quality asset difficult to sell if the financials aren't in order. A lot of people don't know exactly how much they pay per unit, which is just shocking. And a lot of people don't know, when you first ask them, what is their best performing SKU in an e-commerce context. So that's also shocking. In short, no, they're not adequately prepared. It's a highly emotional experience, and we do encourage people to do the preparation before they start selling.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because we do the same thing at Ripple from the venture side when our companies go into a fundraising round. So we don't let them go to a fundraising pitch until they have all the data, until they have all the metrics, so they have all the financials to back up what they're trying to promise or what they can verify that they've actually done as a company before they go out and pitch investors. So it's really interesting to hear that. A lot of people think that marketplaces are a place where a lot of fraud may exist. And I would actually say the opposite. I mean, places like Uber and Airbnb and obviously Flippa, you actually have the data to back it up. You have the digital footprint to verify a lot of this with real hard data, rather than, maybe a small family business that's trying to sell itself privately and has been running as a lifestyle business. And they've just sort of puffed up the numbers right before they go to an acquisition round to make themselves look better, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we do a lot to protect both sides of the marketplace from fraud. So we have fraud prevention software. We have red flag reviews that each one of our marketplace integrity team conduct whenever there is a successful offer placed on the platform, and prior to those assets or the money's being exchanged. We obviously have the data that we went through before. We have the integrated escrow where the money is obviously stored in a wallet and protected there while the buyer goes through an inspection period. So we invest a great deal in marketplace integrity, and frankly, there's very little fraud that happens on marketplaces in general, because all of those businesses that you've alluded to, Airbnb, etc., Uber, as well as ourselves, we put a lot of effort into it.
That's fantastic. Now let's dig into some of the high level stats for our audience, Blake. I've heard that the average acquisition multiple for standalone e-commerce sites was around 3.4 times profits, up from just 3 times last year. What other interesting stats can you share with our audience about the average sale prices, the average time to close a deal, and the average age of companies being sold?
Yeah, so let's work backwards. So average age is a really interesting one, and I almost think age is akin to location in a real estate context. So if an asset is 1 year old or less than 1 year old, nobody wants it. There's not the operational and financial history to be able to assess that asset. And clearly someone buying such a young asset is more likely to be an individual than an institutional buyer who's looking for something more established. But regardless, I think that's a key point. The average asset sold on Flippa is 4.4 years old. And so that's a really interesting and important note, because a lot of people talk about the tailwinds that we've all experienced in the digital economy through COVID, and the fact that there's been this upswing in the number of new starts, business starts, that is. The reality is a lot of those businesses still have lots and lots of maturation before they're fit for sale. And so we're likely to, as is the industry, see a major inflection point in sort of 24 months to 4 years from now. So age is a really important piece. The second one relates to, multiple. Now, we have multiples data for different asset types, obviously for SaaS, content, e-com. Now, the most in-demand asset on Flippa is still a content site. And that is because for most buyers, whilst it's not passive, it's considered to be more passive than other business models. And so if you're looking to inject cash flow into your salary or into your income, content sites still seem to be the best in that regard. Now, they're averaging a 3.2 times net profit. Now, the important thing around that net profit statement is it's an adjusted net profit, what the industry calls SDE, seller discretionary earnings. And that's because, as we alluded to before, a lot of sellers have personal expenses and or one-time cash expenses tied up in the prior 12 months, which are not likely to be carried forward. Now, it's interesting to hear you talk about, I think you said 3 times or 3.4 times net profit multiple for e-com. E-com's complex because you've got Amazon FBA, and that is clearly a particular category of e-com which has got extraordinary tailwinds behind it, massive amounts of money in the institutional sense. So valuations are being pushed up for Amazon, and it's pushing up the entire category. Whereas dropship businesses have fallen out of favor a great deal. And so they've got very low multiples. We're sort of talking about 1.8s to maybe 2 max in a dropship context. So our blended e-com multiple is 2.4.
What would you see on the high end of the range?
6 or 7.
And those are for the content businesses or other businesses?
No, you can have an e-commerce business sold at 6 to 7, and that will often come down to a business which has got really, really strong traffic base, a really, really good brand with brand recognition, quite strong domain authority, but the business owner hasn't optimized the site as well as it could for revenue. So what a buyer's seen there is they've seen opportunity. So they're actually willing to pay a far greater multiple because they recognize that they can easily convert more of the traffic or more of the user base into customers quickly.
And what'd you say the average time to close a deal? 45 days, was it?
45 days.
Wow, that's a lot faster than probably a lot of institutional deals. So are you seeing institutional buyers, these roll-up funds like Thrasio and Boosted, come onto your platform?
So what I would say is they're all registered with Flippa and they've all got mandates and have set preferences. We've only seen 3 of the aggregators transact on our platform at this point in time. I think there's probably 100 or 120 aggregators in the space now. We know them. We've got relationships with them. Clearly, we are a good source of deal flow for them. And we think it's a really, really big part of, I guess, everyone's strategy within this space over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, when dollars are free and people are getting, 25% growth rates year over year, buying these companies and rolling them up, why wouldn't you keep spending money on them? It totally makes sense. But we're seeing a lot of competition heat up in this space with firms like MicroAcquire building partnerships with AngelList for SPVs for raising capital from individuals and Pipe for funding alternatives. In addition, firms like Clearco are offering free business valuation analysis tools for entrepreneurs looking to sell or fundraise for their business. So how is Flippa different from the competition, and why are investors and sellers more inclined to use Flippa?
The key piece really is the liquidity, right? So if you want access to buyers, then you've got to go where the buyers are, and Flippa has more of them than anyone. The second thing is the tools and the feature set which enables you to trade. So it's one thing to say free, which I think some of the new competitors are doing in this market. Free is a great value proposition until you change it. And so it's unlikely you can survive on a free model. And I'm talking about free listings, free success fees, or no success fees, I should say. So we are aware of those companies, but for the most part, we're the only true marketplace. A marketplace is made up of the ability for a seller to easily connect with a buyer, for a buyer to easily find what they're looking for, and for that marketplace to provide the feature set and the platform to do that end to end. And so anyone can call themselves a marketplace once they slap up a few listings. You're only really a marketplace when you can facilitate the transaction end to end. And at this stage, there's some really, really neat companies out there. But I still think the brokers actually are doing a better job than some of those newcomers. And I think the race is clearly on. It's clearly a burgeoning industry. We back ourselves in with 12 years of experience building a marketplace and over 3 million registered users. We think we've got the user base and the technology know-how to build the platform that matters to most people.
And are you saying that, when you're a pure marketplace, that means you're not getting involved on like the financing side or other type of tertiary services? What do you mean by a pure marketplace that these guys aren't?
Well, for the most part, they don't have the negotiation functionality. They don't have the discussion forums. They don't have the tools in which buyers and sellers actually need to conduct the deal end to end. They're mostly a contact form, and that's more akin to a directory versus a marketplace. So the matching is critical for a marketplace. The quality score and the organisation of the assets is critical for a marketplace. The organisation of buyers and the accurate and the ability for those buyers to have a negotiation is key to a marketplace. Now, as to whether we get involved in the lending, we have partnerships. So we have partnerships with Guidant Financial for SBA loans. SBA loans, as much as people would like to ignore them, they're still the most common way that an American will acquire a digital asset or fund their online business today. Now, clearly, there's some extraordinary disruptors in this space. Yardline, which is owned by Thrasio, we are partnered with, and they'll provide acquisition capital for buyers on our platform, and they'll provide growth capital for sellers on our platform. There's some awesome businesses like Pipe and Clearco. You've alluded to those. And partnership opportunities with those companies exist for Flippa, as they do with anyone else. So they're not, those companies are looking to do deals with anyone they can do them with, and we completely are fans of those organisations and what they're doing to democratise access to capital for small business. I think that where it gets really interesting is where you've got the ability to provide your buyers with additional opportunities above and beyond buying to operate. And so there is some discussion in the industry about whether buyers can just invest in high-performing small online businesses in much the same way that VCs invest in startups. But in this case, it's less speculative. You've got proven historical performance. You're not aiming for the moon and back. You're simply aiming for a return on investment over a 12, 24, 36-month period of time, and you get that return on investment on the cash flow earnings of the business. So I think that's probably one of the big things that we would consider, and one of the big things that the industry is doing as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if, we're seeing this sort of bifurcation of the venture funding model with, firms like Pipe breaking apart the sort of later growth stage funding models. But now we're seeing firms like Flippa give access to that elusive exit that typical maybe angel investors or early stage investors would have bet on these companies and then maybe sold them for 5 or 10x, but they would be instrumental in helping them find buyers for those assets. But now there's firms like yours or platforms like yours where you can actually sell a SaaS business. And so does it just go from family and friends or angel investors to a flip, no pun intended, after you've sold a company that you've raised a little bit of money for? And does that take out the early stage venture model?
No, I don't think it takes out the early stage venture model at all. I mean, I truly believe that somebody who is creating an online business is not the same who is creating a disruptive startup that the venture model tends to go for. So venture is looking for something which is truly unique, that is solving a big customer problem that can scale to be of a very material and meaningful size. What we're talking about is the democratizing the exit for small business owners. And those small business owners happen to now be digital versus other. And they're digital versus other because the platforms exist that help you to get started, to grow and to thrive. And I think they're different. For the most part, I'm not suggesting there's not edge cases. Clearly, we've sold startups on Flippa. But for the most part, what we're talking about is a new age small business owner that has scaled their business to 100 to 500 to $1 million rev and didn't ever have ambitions for 500 mil or $1 billion in rev.
No, that makes sense. And I'm glad to hear you say that, because that means I still have a job. But I totally understand, what you're saying, the differences. What other exciting initiatives are you planning with Flippa so users can get excited about the future of the platform?
Yeah, so the things we're working on right now, and I encourage people to give it a shot. I mean, we started with 20 different machine learning models. We're now down to 5 different machine learning models that are governing our valuation. And so given our 12 years worth of sales data and the sheer number of transactions we do, we are working hard to ensure that any online business owner can get a very quick, accurate valuation as to what their business is worth. And so we spend a lot of time talking about our valuation algorithm and how it powers the universe of small business owners out there. That's kind of piece one. Piece two is we believe that when a buyer acquires a business, they need help. And so what we're working on is putting together a constituent number of services that help buyers to grow and thrive post-acquisition. Because what we don't want to do is be this marketplace where a buyer buys something, we celebrate the sale, and we don't help that buyer become successful. Because ultimately the success of a marketplace relates to the success of that buyer long-term, in our opinion. And so we're working on a network of services powered by experts around the world that can help these buyers run their businesses efficiently post-acquisition. And they're probably 2 of the biggest things we're working on right now.
I absolutely love that. I always said that there's got to be a way to democratize access to those consulting firm services for small, medium businesses. They can't afford them, but there's a lot of value that they can get out of just having someone's, brain power to come in and help their business on a consulting basis. And it sounds like you're trying to help these small, medium business acquirers level up their business so that they come back and maybe become their own roll-up and buy more businesses off Flippa. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, well, we're uniquely positioned in that regard because we've got 3 million users. So those users come with expertise. And so we're able to farm that user base and curate a collection of experts to help. So that's kind of piece one. The other thing about this is that we find that most sellers and buyers also become sellers and buyers. So buyers become sellers, sellers become buyers. And so if we can help these acquirers become successful acquisition entrepreneurs, there's no reason why 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track, they don't then say, well, I realized what I set out to realize, and now I'm going to realize my investment and go and sell it back on the platform. And we see that time and time again, from the very small to the big. We've seen assets as small as $7,500 get resold on the platform for $550. We've seen assets as high as $250,000 get resold back on the platform for a couple of million. It happens, and it's clear evidence of the fact that you can acquire something with traction and scale from there versus having to do the blood, sweat, and tears approach of trying to find your first 100 customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I meet with entrepreneurs that acquire businesses online for like 75,000, and they're doing 2.5 million in revenue a couple of years later. It's quite incredible. I got to ask though, with all those crypto millionaires out there, are you ever considering allowing people to pay with crypto or stable coins on the platform?
So the drum beat is loud, Matt, and we need to do something about it. So I don't have a time frame for you. We've got a very, very rich product roadmap of features we know that our customers want. That's one of them. So I can imagine that in a very short period of time, we will enable people to pay with crypto of some sort.
No, well, it's on the roadmap, people. That's all you had to hear. All right. So you recently raised an 11 million Series A round led by OneVentures. Can you tell us a little bit about your plans with those funds and where people can connect with you for all those roles I assume you're hiring for?
Yeah, so most of the roles will be hired out of Austin, Texas, although, the world has changed. So we're very much open to A-grade talent in a remote context wherever they are. Our three biggest markets are the US, UK, and Canada, shortly followed by Europe as a whole. So we need to scale our expert advisor team. And so this is the network of people who will work with e-commerce business owners, SaaS business owners, apps, etc. And we'll be doing that mostly out of Austin, but we do have some roles set out for Europe as well. The second thing we'll be doing is building on our product and engineering team. So clearly what I'm talking about right now is hiring, and a big chunk of the funds will be used to double the size of the team to around 100 staff within probably 6 months from today. The next piece of this, which sounds really obvious, is 99% of online business owners have no idea they can sell. So we want to build awareness for Flippa. And so we're going to go and tell the world that we exist. And we'll do that through the usual marketing means that everyone's heard of, as well as some clever programmatic effort that we've got up our sleeves right now to drive deal flow at scale. And then it really comes down to product innovation. And so we'll be testing a bunch of different opportunities. There's three ways to grow a marketplace, right? New customers, new products, new markets. And so we think about that a lot, and we organize our innovation, our R&D, all of our marketing spend and effort around testing whether there's opportunity for Flippa in new markets. Southeast Asia is a burgeoning market for online business. Latin America is a burgeoning market for online business. I wouldn't even say burgeoning. They're just huge. So we'll do some stuff in those markets for sure. Hopefully that gives you some insight.
That's awesome. Wow. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for Flippa. And like I said, I'm a passive window shopping buyer, but always interested to see what comes across the platform for interest. Before we wrap things up, we always ask our guests for their fast favorites. So I list off 5 or 6 categories and you name your favorite of each. So first, your favorite podcast.
Oh, my favorite podcast. I still like Business Wars, where they talk about Blockbuster versus Netflix and Pepsi versus Coke. So that's my favorite podcast.
So is it going to be Flippa versus MicroAcquire in the next one?
I think we're about 10 times bigger.
All right. Favorite newsletter or blog?
I really like investing.io.
Nice. Favorite tech gadget?
Tech gadget. I'm just going to go with my phone.
It's an easy one. Favorite new trend?
NFTs.
Nice. Favorite book?
Black Box Thinking by Matthew, I think his last name's pronounced as Syed.
Nice. And last but not least, your favorite life lesson?
Don't peak when you're 18.
All right. That's the perfect one for having you. Thanks so much. I appreciate you joining us in the tank today, Blake, to discuss the rise of digital asset marketplaces with founder of Flippa, Blake Hutchison.
Thanks very much, Matt. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Tank Talks. To learn more about this episode, be sure to go to Apple Podcast or Spotify to find more detailed notes on this episode or to check out previous episodes. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and a rating as it helps us out a lot. And hit that subscribe button so you can get notified when new episodes come out. Finally, make sure to give me a follow on Twitter @MattyBCohen or @Tank Talk Podcast to stay up to date on new episodes or to be a guest on our show. Till next time,